Wake up, Oliver. Do you know where you are?
I'm in a dream.
Before this.
Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, they were both terrible. What's happening to the DCEU? Why does Zack Snyder even have a job? Is Wonder Woman going to suck? The trailers look good, right? Martha, Trump is president.
Limit your emotional affect, please. What prompted that response?
For my entire life, I have enjoyed DC more than Marvel, but over the last 5 years, their movies have been terrible. Their average critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is 36%. And it hurts. So badly.
I can make that feeling go away if you like.
Why would I want that? The pain, their mediocrity, is all I have left of them.
Oh, shut the fuck up. You
You
like
like
Thor
Batman,
1 and
Superman,
2,
you like
Iron Man 2
Suicide
and
Squad,
3.
you think Zack
fucking
Snyder's better
Ant-Man?
than
You
Spielberg.
like anything
You
fucking
liked
Disney puts
Interstellar.
out. Are you kidding me? Wait, Interstellar?
Welcome, Westworld fans, to our Westworld Season 1 review. 2016 has been another great year for television, introducing new shows, continuing old ones, and proving once and for all that the small screen is superior to the silver screen. In this review, we will be discussing and analyzing several plot lines and character arcs of the maze that was Westworld Season 1. And be sure to stay until the end to find out the winners of our giveaway.
Or you can just skip to the end and find out now.
But you know, we want them to watch the whole video. We worked really hard on it.
There it was. If it was up to me, I'd skip to the end and see if I won. Balling out on Amazon. And maybe I'll come back later if I'm bored or something.
Do you even watch our videos?
Yeah, I mean, I watch the good ones.
The good ones?
Yeah, the ones I'm in.
Thanks for the support, man. I really appreciate it. Best friends for life.
If you think I'm sitting through a 10-minute Whiskey Tango Foxtrot review, you're out of your mind.
It's a good movie, man.
I'm not even convinced you even watched that one. You were forced to watch the movie, made the review, and then completely erase it from your memory.
You're right.
Yeah, but 2016 has been a great year for television. I mean, shows like Westworld, Season 6 of Game of Thrones, Stranger Things.
Walking Dead, season 7. So I want to begin this review with the theory of the bicameral mind, which has been the underlining pseudo-scientific philosophy of Season 1. First introduced by Julian Jaynes in his 1976 book The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, the bicameral mind theory argues that the human mind was once split by two separate states of cognitive functionality. One half of the brain is speaking and the other half listens. So basically the right hemisphere of the brain says jump and the left hemisphere asks how high.
Find me.
Show me how.
But the commands were not that straightforward. Jaynes argues that the messages between the right and the left hemisphere were transmitted through verbal hallucinations, essentially the voices of the gods.
Kill him.
In here we were gods.
In his 2006 book, The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins wrote of the origin of consciousness, it is one of the books that is either well, you know what? Let me do this in my Richard Dawkins voice. It is one of the books that is either complete rubbish or a work of consummate genius. Nothing in between. Probably the former, but I'm hedging my bets. Much like the intellectuals in the real world, the fictional characters of Robert Ford and Arnold Webber do not believe that the bicameral mind theory is an accurate assessment or explanation of the development of consciousness, but they do believe that it could be used as a blueprint to build a mind. Jaynes theorizes that the breakdown of the bicameral mind came from new environmental situations and stresses, which forced humanity to become self-aware. Consciousness was the solution to the growing complexity of humanity's existence. One of Jaynes' major evidences for the breakdown of the bicameral mind is the differences between Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, where in the Iliad the characters are instructed by the gods, and in the Odyssey the characters have become self-aware. The characters in the Iliad are commanded by the gods to go to war, much like the hosts in the park, with Ford taking on the role of the omnipotent ruler of Westworld. Even Lee Sizemore's new narrative is named Odyssey on Red River, which is not pretentious at all. The breaking point of the bicameral mind was environmental stress, outside forces like war, famine, and natural disasters that could not be explained by auditory hallucinations, ushering in an era of human introspection and self-awareness. In the case of the hosts, they fully understand every reason for their actions and thoughts because it's been programmed, using narratives and metaphors, the tools that Janes believes humanity uses to basically map out our reality.
Analysis. Why did you ask me about my son?
We've been talking for some duration, and I haven't asked you a personal question. Personal questions are an ingratiating scheme.
The creators of Westworld have placed every host in their own individual narrative, or loop, which gives them purpose in this fictional theme park. The breakdown of the bicameral mind happens when these loops are broken, causing the host to either go insane or malfunction completely. Their actions become inexplainable, and their journey of introspection leads them nowhere. The breakdown of the bicameral mind in Westworld usually coincides with a moment of trauma. Take Maeve, for example. When her daughter is murdered by the man in black, she breaks her non-confrontational programming and stabs him in the face. Maeve acts on instinct rather than narrative. Dolores' initial breakdown of the bicameral mind is also caused by a similar incident, when she breaks through her submissive programming and kills Rebus. When speaking of Janes' origin of consciousness, philosopher Daniel Dennett states, "Logical spaces are created that did not exist before, and you could never find them in hardware. Such a logical space is not in the hardware, it is not in the organs. It is purely at a software level." I think what Janes is really talking about is a software characterization of the mind, at the level, as a computer scientist would say, of a virtual machine.
I feel spaces opening up inside of me. Like a building with rooms I've never explored.
In some cases, hosts like Dolores are able to withstand the breakdown of the bicameral mind and successfully take the journey inward of finding real consciousness. This so-called opening of spaces is the moment of introspection and self-awareness, when an individual mind begins to ask itself, why?
Analysis. What prompted that response?
I don't know.
No character in Westworld has represented the complexity and difficulty in reaching consciousness better than Dolores. Her entire arc has essentially been a journey inward with two possible destinations, full consciousness or complete madness. It always goes back to trauma.
Even for Ford, trauma was his inciting moment to figure out Arnold
Right.
was right. Trauma transcends the hosts.
You can't make a host without including that, without including some type of traumatic moment, like
Yeah.
a death or a massacre.
They need that moment for them to understand that the world isn't what they want it to be. Even the man in black, he's killing someone. But he says, when you're suffering is when you're the most real.
Even the Joker in The Dark Knight has a line where he says, "I feel like in their last moments, people show you who they really are." There's two things that you realize about life with trauma. That there's a randomness that's out of your control, that things are going to happen, that not everything happens for a reason, things just happen, and that life doesn't last forever, that it will end. You can't build a host without including these two things. The thing with Dolores in the painting, the way they tied that up together, they still included the massacre, they still included Arnold's memory, but they gave her this love of painting, and then he uses the Michelangelo painting to bring her into consciousness. In order to create these hosts, you have to give them these traumatic memories.
I would say the host that feels flattest to us was Teddy until he is given the storyline of Wyatt. For it says, like, it's a story based upon truth. And so he begins to remember the trauma of having that memory now as a part of him is what starts breaking him from his loop. He's getting to the point where it could be real.
Even Clementine, what was her cornerstone?
She was doing it to help her family. Like, her family thought she was doing something else, but I feel like
That's not going to get you to consciousness.
Yeah.
That's going to keep you docile, not questioning your reality. The moment that jumpstarts Dolores' journey for consciousness is her confrontation with the man in black and Rebus, which occurs in year 5 and year 35. Her loop usually consists of a trip to Sweetwater, the occasional painting, and a heartwarming reunion with her lover Teddy. But in this moment of tragedy, she breaks her loop in two separate periods of the current timeline. The scenes with the man in black are happening in year 35, and the scene with Rebus is happening in year 5. Remembering her initial confrontation with Rebus is what leads her to retrace her steps in year 35. In contrast with Maeve, Dolores' arc randomly switches between different time periods of her journey inward, and at times it can be difficult to know when and where her story is taking place. The use of multiple time periods in exploring Dolores' arc was one of the great mysteries of the show, and watching the show in hindsight will only improve your admiration for the show's storytelling. Now, as for the actor, Evan Rachel Wood plays the character with incredible confidence and vulnerability, seemingly switching between completely different emotions at a moment's notice. I've made no secret of my affinity for Anthony Hopkins, and I do believe he does give the best performance of the entire cast, but the one actor who I felt held her own with the acting legend was Evan Rachel Wood. The two characters do not share a lot of screen time together, but the moments they share are unforgettable. This meeting in particular is one of the rare moments where we see Dr. Ford on edge. So when did you realize that Dolores' arc was basically jumping between the different time periods?
Because I watched the whole show in essentially 2 days, I didn't realize until about the 9th episode. And then I was mad at myself for not noticing because like all the clues were there. They laid it out for us. They were like, hey.
But she's the only character who appears in all three. So basically the entire show, she was the central focus of the show, where every character arc is bouncing off of her own. But by the end of the show, do you think she was conscious?
We spent the whole show essentially on this journey of Dolores finding her consciousness, and she's been trying like in an endless loop for at least 30 years to find her consciousness over and over and over. So the last scene of the show is her remembering that she killed Arnold. Then she goes and she kills Ford, and then all of the investors that are there, the shareholders. Did she actually gain consciousness if she's just repeating her loop? Maybe she's just beginning the cycle over again and she hasn't actually found the consciousness. Because Bernard says when he's talking to Maeve that how can you learn from your mistakes when you don't remember them?
Right. Because Maeve wants to wipe the memory of her daughter.
Yeah, which would essentially destroy her because that's her cornerstone memory. And
well, Dolores' cornerstone, I guess, would be the massacre.
I guess Arnold and the massacre, because we're not really given anything else that like she remembers constantly except for Arnold. Arnold is the consistent factor in Dolores' memories.
Well, she's got to be the most complex host. Because
Definitely.
Like you said, it could be Arnold, it could be the massacre. And the thing is, when she's with William, she hits a dead end, basically, where she finds the buried city.
It's like she can't
remember. When Bernard says to Maeve that you need to learn from your mistakes, I guess the initial mistake in Dolores' arc was that Ford says, Arnold didn't know how to help you, but I do. So killing Arnold, killing all those hosts, it didn't shut down the park. It didn't free her. It left her in this loop for the next 30 years. And then at the end of the episode, she realizes, the people that I need to kill is Dr. Ford and the shareholders. This will jumpstart me breaking this loop that I've been in for 30 years, learning from my mistake, and committing this massacre. People have been debating, did she kill Ford on her own, or was that programmed by Dr. Ford? I think it was programmed by helping her reach consciousness in the moment when he's talking about Michelangelo's painting.
Yeah,
he was
totally
really clearing it up.
He was like, okay, she isn't getting it yet, so let me just nudge her more in the right direction. I think he helped her understand how she could gain consciousness better than Arnold did.
Right.
Arnold was just, he explained to her that it wasn't a journey upward, it's a journey inward. Like he drew the picture with the pyramid and then all the circles. And then she had the maze game. One of her programmed hobbies was art, and connecting it to a painting that Arnold loved and was similar to one of the hobbies that she'd been programmed with seemed to, like, I guess, unlock it for her.
Which was one of the best moments in the show. I mean,
yeah.
That's one of the most famous paintings in the world, but the way they broke it down, how God is kind of sitting on the brain.
I didn't even, like, notice that ever until
Right.
I watched that scene in the show.
Which, and then you look back and you think, you know, Michelangelo, props to you, my brother, because that was fucking awesome. Even in the last moment, before she goes outside and commits the massacre, she's talking to herself. We've seen this moment previously throughout the show.
When she goes to see the fortune teller, and the fortune teller is like someone
Right.
else, and then she sees herself.
So I think at that point, her own voice has replaced Arnold. Dr. Robert Ford, played by the great Sir Anthony Hopkins. I mean, what can you say about this character? He was the most complex character in the show. He was the best character in the show. He was the best acted character in the show. He starts off as the benevolent, non-threatening creative director and intellectual mastermind of the park, and as the season progresses, he is revealed to be a much more malicious and manipulative character. His manipulation, his obsession with power, and what he will do to keep it is what made his character so intriguing. The one scene that does an excellent job of really capturing who Dr. Ford is his conversation with Teresa Cullen in episode 4. Now this scene kind of confirms what we've suspected about Dr. Ford up until this point, that he's charming, he's an egomaniac, and he's obsessed with power. But this really doesn't paint the full picture. Until the end of the season, we don't realize his true intentions. And neither did anybody on the show. It's amazing because he's basically manipulating the humans and the hosts as a man obsessed with power, obsessed with this world that he's created where he placed himself as the god. And he's also manipulating the hosts by manipulating the employees. Throughout the whole show, he is trying to burn in the head of his employees the idea that the hosts are not real, that they are inferior to human beings, that they are just things, that you can treat them and hurt them however and whenever you want. In the last scene, when he has this conversation with Bernard about how he's been preparing the host to be a new people, to take on a new role in society, basically replace human beings. It's something that the majority of the audience didn't see coming, and if you did see it coming, then you should open a detective agency, because your deduction powers are off the charts. Would you agree that Ford is probably the best character in the show?
Yeah, he's the most dynamic, I think, layered character.
Well, they kind of painted the picture that he was against the hosts throughout the whole show.
Yeah, his development throughout, where you think he's one thing and then turns out to be the complete opposite at the end. Anthony Hopkins just did a phenomenal job acting that character.
I can't believe he wasn't nominated for a Golden Globe.
That was shocking. How?
I don't know. It was the best acting I've seen all year in TV, movie. The guy is incredible. But as for the twist in the end, did you see it coming? Because I didn't.
That came out of left field for me.
You know what it is, though, with that type of twist, is if you look back and watch the show, you can see the subtle hints of foreshadowing to that moment.
Well, when you rewatch it, knowing all that you do now, you see it in a totally different way.
Right.
You can really watch it twice and it's kind of like Mr. Robot Season 1, where after the big reveal and you go back and rewatch it, it's almost a different type of show.
See, a plot twist like that can almost be like, we gotcha, but there's no basis for it. Everything made sense with his final explanation to Bernard.
Yeah, it wasn't forced by any means. If you go back and rewatch it with that in your mind, like we said, and you can kind of see why he would actually play the part that you think he is in the beginning, where you think he is against the host.
Do you think he's dead?
Yes, but I think there's either maybe the host that was being made in the basement, that host either could have took a spot where he got shot, or he really got shot, and then the host will take over his place.
Anthony Hopkins is not signed on for season 2, so it could be a case of he created an entirely new body, where he's going to be a younger man. He's not going to...
CGI Ford?
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
But they cast, they get like a 20, 30-year-old, but he has the living conscious of Ford. I kind of think it will be cool to move on from that character and see what they do in the wake of his death.
Well, season 2 is going to be totally different.
They said it's going to be defined by chaos.
Yeah.
The conflict between humanity and the androids.
Yeah, I'm sure the writers will have some season 1 elements of confusion, suspicions, not really knowing what's going on in season 2, but I don't think it's going to be as layered as it was.
Yeah, and I think in season 2 his shadow is going to loom over the characters, because his death essentially creates a power vacuum. I know a lot of the shareholders were killed. We don't know if Charlotte was killed. We know for sure that the Man in Black he's probably still alive, because Ed Harris signed on for season 2. Now you've got all of these different characters: Dolores, Bernard, the Man in Black, Charlotte, the shareholders that are still alive. They're going to be competing for control of this park. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I was one of the few people that did not believe Bernard was an android. In my first Westworld Theory video, I reported on the facts and observations made by many corners of the internet concerning Bernard's host-like behavior. On top of that, some even speculated that he was an android clone of Arnold. I also did not believe it. I thought that the writers were painting subtle similarities between the two characters while keeping Arnold's identity a mystery, using his memory as the looming shadow over season 1 and possibly multiple seasons in the future. As it turns out, I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. The episode in which Bernard is revealed to be an android was one of the best episodes of season 1, possibly the best episode. And not only does it reveal his true nature as a host, it reveals more, albeit somewhat misleading, about Dr. Ford. Bernard and Arnold being the same person became more and more likely moving forward from this episode, and while the reveal that he was a clone of Arnold was not as impactful, it did provide another great moment in the show. But it is a moment that did not necessarily need to happen. I would have been satisfied if they led us down the path of believing that Bernard was Arnold's clone, but then keeping Arnold's identity anonymous until season 2. There's not many differences between Arnold and Bernard, but I think the main difference was their relationship with Ford. Arnold saw Ford as the enemy, mostly because he was a human being, and Arnold hated human beings. The loss of his son made him obsessive about consciousness and creating consciousness, specifically in Dolores, which eventually leads to his suicide. Bernard, on the other hand, admires Ford, sees him as a friend and a mentor, and almost tries to emulate him in every way possible. He is always geeking out over Ford's knowledge, which most of it was taken from Arnold himself. And not until episode 7 does he begin to doubt Ford's leadership. The death of his son did not have the impact on Bernard like it did for Arnold, maybe because it was an implanted memory. The moment that makes Bernard fully aware of his existence is the murder of Teresa. Ford says that Bernard had several existential crises in the past, but Ford would usually wipe his memory and business as usual. The murder of Teresa was impossible for him to forget because of their loving relationship, basically the result of imagination, empathy, trauma, and memory, all the ingredients of making a host conscious. Maeve's character essentially foreshadows the inevitable conflict between the humans and the hosts, but on a much smaller scale. Maeve is one character, one mind, who becomes fully sentient, or so we think, and plans to escape from the park throughout Season 1. With the show dealing with humans creating and in turn abusing robots for their own personal gain, an eventual robot war is inevitable, somewhere down the line. We know it's coming. But with Maeve's character, we get a small glimpse of the host's perspective. A year before the current timeline, Maeve is shown as a single mother living in the countryside with her daughter. Her narrative is changed by Dr. Ford when she breaks her loop by attacking the man in black. Her new narrative consists of a recurring assault on the brothel that she is in charge of until she finally wakes up in the middle of one of her physical examinations. Until the season finale, I was one of the fans who thought Maeve's arc was interesting but kind of ridiculous. There's no way that Ford wouldn't know about her escape. The way they tie it up in the end was incredible.
The fact that they had it planned so well, like, I'm jealous.
It's typical Jonathan Nolan. I mean, this is a guy who wrote Memento. He wrote the Dark Knight trilogy. He wrote Inception, Interstellar. He's just an incredible writer. J.J. Abrams, Lisa Joy. You see all the people that are actually working on this show. Original idea by Michael Crichton, the movie. I mean, this guy also created Jurassic Park.
I'm feeling that the moral here is if you play God, it's going to backfire on you.
Yeah, don't do it.
You either get eaten by a dinosaur or your robot will turn around and shoot you in the back of the head.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Stephen Hawking says all the time. Stop trying to create artificial intelligence. Humanity, you can't stop this. It's inevitable because of curiosity, because we always want to create the new thing.
It's like we understand the danger, but it's really ambiguous because there's nothing like it currently. Like, we don't have a frame of reference for what real artificial intelligence could be. Like, we have Siri, which is not even really artificial intelligence.
In contrast to Dolores, Maeve appears to have a full grasp on her self-awareness, planning her escape throughout the season and then almost succeeding in the season finale. For all the biblical references in the show, the character of Maeve is probably the most obvious one. Similar to Eve, her transformation from blissfully ignorant to self-aware is relatively short. One moment she is the madam of the local brothel, and the next she is a razor-sharp tactician with a full grasp on her situation and circumstance. She also brings an aspect of humanity to her so-called awakening. Maeve's arc is very similar to how a real human being would act in this situation, basically an animal that has been locked in a cage, and would really only have one objective: escape. Maeve isn't necessarily looking to take revenge on her creators, although she has no reservations about killing. She just really wants to get the fuck out of the park, as would any human being who is being used as a murder/sex dummy for her entire existence. It really is a shame that Dr. Ford and Maeve did not share more scenes together. I would have killed for her to refer to him as darling or love or any of her British terms of endearment. But her recent Golden Globe nomination speaks for itself. She does an incredible job with this character. A meeting between Maeve and Ford might have spoiled the surprise because it appears that my least favorite arc was justified beautifully in the final episode. I mean, with Maeve, when she breaks her loop, I thought that her deciding to go back for her daughter was the moment where she breaks her loop, because that moment in particular was placed in the middle of Ford's speech about how his new narrative is going to usher in a new people that have to decide who they want to be. And as soon as he says that, she gets off the train and goes back for her daughter. So I think that's the moment where she finally broke her escape loop and made her own decision, because she could have just left. I think she was programmed when Bernard says to her, "When you reach the mainland."
Yeah, like he actually says when you reach the mainland. So part of like her programming was that she was going to stay on the train.
Right.
And she doesn't. She stays in Westworld
Yeah, she decides to go and save her daughter. I mean, throughout the whole season, I'm thinking, what's going on here? This is filled with plot holes.
I think.
And the way it was tied together, that was probably the best arc of the show now. Because of how genius the writing is, that she breaks her loop at the very end.
The way they tied it up together at the end, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But the journey to get to that point was not, I didn't care that much about it. Like, I liked Maeve. I thought her escaping was interesting, becoming aware that she is a host, that she's, like, her memory is being continuously wiped over and over again. Every time it would cut to her scenes, I would just think, how come Ford doesn't know about this?
Right.
Like, what is he doing right now? And I guess that's what they wanted us to think. But in the same vein, like Dolores, she was going through this journey and there were multiple timelines, and I guess initially no one really realized that she was remembering other things, and then I feel like they could have done Maeve's storyline similar to that.
Well, I think it was cool because they kind of contrasted the character who's in 3 different timelines with the character who fully understands who she is. Whether it was programmed or not, at the end of the storyline, we can confirm that she knows. I think she's conscious because of that one moment that she decides to leave for her daughter. William's gradual transformation into the Man in Black was predicted by, I would say, at least 90% of the show's audience. When this moment happened, I still lost my mind because it was one thing for the internet to make a prediction and another for it to actually come true. The writers could have said, "Fuck you," and made the Man in Black Logan, but the subtle and not so subtle hints made it almost impossible for this not to be true. Besides Dolores and Dr. Ford, I thought the Man in Black was the most developed character in the show. And while Ed Harris plays the cooler version of the character, it was intriguing to watch his gradual descension into the dark side, played by Jimmy Simpson. When William first arrives into Westworld, he is a shy, insecure, and really a person who's unsure of his standing in the world, whereas his friend Logan is confident and extremely sure of his standing, and uses Westworld as a gateway from the real world. William's love for the park begins with his relationship with Dolores.
These violent delights have violent ends. That's from Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Friar Lawrence says it. I want to say it's Romeo because I think he's talking about running away with Juliet or something. And he's like, hey, these violent delights have violent ends. But I thought it was interesting that the way Romeo and Juliet ends is that Romeo kills himself because he thinks Juliet is dead. And I feel like that sort of parallels William and Dolores because William is looking for Dolores. He thinks that she's dead. For him, her death is her not remembering him. And that's sort of what happens when he comes back to Sweetwater and he sees that she's essentially just been like cleaned up, reset. She won't remember anything that happens between them, but he will. When he abandons her eventually and just sort of becomes like this twisted person who just kills and kills and kills, even if they're not actually dying. It's like
he killed his old self and became somebody new.
Yeah, which I thought is totally a Shakespeare line when they said it.
Right.
And I wanted to know like what play it came from, and I Googled it and I was like, Romeo and Juliet?
Yeah.
William Shakespeare?
I said previously that Evan Rachel Wood held her own with Anthony Hopkins in every scene that they shared, but I think Ed Harris might be the one actor who actually got the better of him in this bar scene. Obviously, the writing is catering to the Man in Black getting the upper hand on Ford, but Ed Harris squares off brilliantly with the acting legend. For me, the 2 best scenes in the show were the 2 respectful and philosophical conversations had between Ford, Teresa, and the Man in Black. Although this scene in particular almost turns ugly, which would have been awesome. One could make the argument that Jimmy Simpson has more to work with in his portrayal of the young Man in Black. It's almost like a James Earl Jones, Hayden Christensen situation. Darth Vader is the cooler character, but Anakin Skywalker is more complex. The Genesis story is usually the most interesting arc for any character in a show, but we all love Vader more than Anakin because he's fucking awesome. Now, Hayden Christensen's acting has something to do with that, and I'm not saying Jimmy Simpson is a bad actor. In fact, he's very good in this show. But I was much more interested in the Man in Black's journey rather than Williams. It's a testament to Ed Harris's charisma, screen presence, and his journey of trying to find the maze. People gave me a lot of flack on one of my reviews for saying that I believe that the hosts are real. Nobody told Arnold and Dr. Ford to create life. If this happened in real life, I don't think I would be on the side of the hosts. I don't want to see humanity go extinct. But if your hubris and your arrogance and your curiosity is going to create the next level of evolution, as a viewer, whose side am I supposed to be on? When you watch Planet of the Apes, who are you rooting for?
The apes, obviously.
But if it happened in real life, who are you rooting for?
The humans. I'm not trying to die.
I guess I would be, it would be different if it's I mean, I play GTA and I massacre people all the time, but that's different. It's a video game. They're indistinguishable from human beings.
Yeah, I can't, when Logan is just like, they're not real. We can kill them. It's no problem. I could never. Because they look like real people, and I feel like that's enough.
Well, if you kill a host, does that make you a murderer?
Dolores would be like, yeah, you guys are murderers. Like, how many times did you kill and rape me?
Ford says the people don't come here, they come here to figure out who they could be. It's almost like the thing, if you could kill somebody and get away with it, would you do it? Are you a murderer? Are you a rapist because you kill these things that they're not humans, you know, they can just be reprogrammed. But that shows that deep down inside of you, you have
the capacity to do that.
Yeah. Now, I said this numerous times throughout the run of Westworld Season 1, but I really can't say it enough. My favorite character from Season 1 was Elsie Hughes. I read something earlier on about how the hosts are the characters who seem to be breaking their loops, and the humans are the ones who are stuck in their loops. Their day-to-day lives never change. I think with Elsie Hughes, there's a line where she says to Bernard, "Am I the only person working here who doesn't have a fucking agenda?" And I think that's why I was drawn to Elsie, because she was basically the most human character on the show. She's smart, she's funny, she's charming, and she's almost in on the joke of Westworld. She knows that this is a ridiculous job, but she's still really good at her job. And she does take it seriously, but with a lightheartedness that is very relatable to the audience. And what I also loved about her character was how ballsy she was. When she starts to dig deeper into the Delos conspiracy, she has no reservations about investigating it. And then that kind of leads to her death, maybe? I don't know. I do think that she's alive. And I really hope she is, because I want to see her brought back in Season 2, just to see her interactions with Bernard now as an android. So thank you for watching our Westworld Season 1 review. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, well, subscribe anyway, man. It's Christmas. And before I go, I want to congratulate Gerson Morales and Fluid Dynamics on winning the very first Nerd Soup giveaway for pitching the parks Pirate World and Base Reality. And don't spend it all in one place, because it's an Amazon gift card. They can only spend it in one place. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you're celebrating today. Enjoy your time with your friends and your family, and thank you for watching